responsibility to me, I will definitely have a boost on my confidence.
Good afternoon and warm welcome. Our heartfelt gratitude to the Supreme Being for brightening this International Faculty Development Program. Convener, Mr. Harish Nirmal's unique perspective adds so much for the grand success of this Faculty Development Program. Sir, I request you to deliver welcome address.
Thank you, ma'am. Thank you. Good afternoon to all. So I welcome you again for the last day of the faculty development program. One second. Sorry for the inconvenience. I welcome you again for the last day of this faculty development. I welcome you again for the last day of the faculty development program. It gives me immense pleasure to deliver the welcome address today. Like every literary piece has its background of origin, how it was produced. This faculty development program has also its history of origin. Nothing much, just a casual conversation among our colleagues about the difficulties that we face while handling classes through online mode during this pandemic situation. Though we have used the digital mode of teaching now and then to students, a complete changeover to the online platform of teaching has become a tremendous challenge for the teaching fraternity. Hence, we have to plan. Hence, we have planned to get some ideas from various professionals in and around India, which ended up in organizing this international faculty development program. For this, I would like to thank our head of the department, Dr. Sumati, who has readily accepted and supported our idea of conducting this program. I also thank our principal, Dr. Ganesh Ram, for his profound encouragement to conduct this FDP. On behalf of the Department of Malaysia, I welcome you all for the 5th day of this faculty development program. I also thank the management and the department members of the University of Malaya, Malaysia, for their constant support and encouragement by joining with us in this FDP program. So with this note, I conclude my welcome note and I introduce Dr. John Joseph Kennedy, sir, from Christ University. So Professor John Joseph Kennedy is a professor of English and Cultural Studies and the Dean of Arts and Humanities at Christ Deemed to be University, Bangalore. Dr. Kennedy, sir, has joined Christ University in 1990 and continues to inspire and motivate the student community and the faculty fraternity in different capacities. Currently, Dr. John Joseph Kennedy is Professor of English and Cultural Studies and Dean of Arts and Humanities at Christ Deemed to be University, Bangalore. With a rich experience of 3 decades in the field of higher education, his contribution to teaching, learning, and research has been hugely inspirational to the student community at large. His areas of academic interest include professional studies, cultural studies, film studies, subaltern studies, and diasporic studies. He has published 4 books and several papers in reputed academic journals in these areas. Besides, he has contributed immensely to enriching the rich body of knowledge through talks and lectures in national and international conferences. Currently, he is also extensively involved in education leadership, faculty development, and mentoring at several institutions in India and abroad. So we feel proud and honored to have Dr. John Joseph Kennedy sir in this faculty development program. Actually, sir has visited our campus once when we conducted a faculty development program in Satur. So we were very much inspired by the speech that sir gave on that faculty development program. So as we enjoyed, I hope this session will be liked by you all. Kennedy sir, over to you. Thank you, sir.
All right, thank you. Can you hear me? Am I audible?
Sir, please, you can start your.
Okay. Am I audible?
Yes,
Say yes
sir.
or no?
Yes,
All right.
sir.
Okay. Thank you. All right. So thank you very much for those warm words of introduction. I'm absolutely happy, to be associated with this international faculty development program, pedagogical shift from text to hypertext, language and literature to the digital natives, organized by Sri S. Ramaswamy Naidu Memorial College, Satur, and University Malaya, Malaysia. As you rightly mentioned, yes, I did have an opportunity to meet you all in person a few years ago, and I still remember, the cordial, hospitality, welcome, that you accorded, and those memories are still, green in my mind. Thank you very much for that, and thank you also very much for the invitation. This time, I must, place on record my sincere appreciation and gratitude to the organizers, particularly the head of the department and Faculty of English, and also Dr. Ajanta, who was in touch with me, discussing things, and also the management of both the institutions which are organizing this event. So thank you very much. It feels so good, to be back, of course, this time in the virtual space, not really in person. But it's always a pleasure, to interact with colleagues in the field of education, because all said and done, we are in many ways molding young minds. We have that responsibility, right? Molding the young minds, because they're going to shape the future of the nation. So it's always a wonderful thing to be with young minds with so much, energy and enthusiasm. But the only thing is, afternoon sessions can be very, very difficult, right? Very difficult to handle, I know, especially if you've had a good lunch. I'm not sure. Good lunch at least is okay, but if you had a sumptuous lunch, I think it's going to be very difficult. So now, sitting on the other side, we all know how difficult it is, for our students to listen to us in the afternoon, the kind of torture, that they think we are meeting out to them, right? So anyway, my request to all of you is to stay awake, all right? And we also need to probably, sympathize with our students. This exercise would help us, understand the kind of plight that they're going through, right? All through the year, they're enduring, this kind of a torture, right? Sitting in the afternoon and listening to something very serious. I don't claim what I'm going to share with you is very profound, but I'm sure, there's something, that probably you can make use of in your day-to-day interaction with students, right? So jokes apart. So I hope you will stay awake and actively take part in this last and, valedictory session, as it is called, because we are still discussing the same topic, a very important topic indeed. And let me begin with some interaction, right? Because let me tell you, this entire, session that we're going to have this afternoon, I would like it to be as interactive as possible, right? And then most of the time we're going to use the chat box. So I mean, that's one way of also, keeping you engaged and keeping you active, all right? Not to resort to multitasking because you may have so many devices, beside you. I really can't see what's happening, right? I'm only assuming things. So let's do that. So let me, start with this question, right? Now, at least a few responses I would like to have, right? Tell me, how exactly are you feeling right now, right? I would like to have a few responses. Just state how you feel. What is a kind of, state of mind or, state of being that, you are in? Come on, anybody? I would like to see the messages. New learning, great. All right, okay. Excited to learn. Interesting, very nice. Yeah, curious, enthusiastic. Absolutely, absolutely. Right, happy and comfortable. Yeah, that's very nice. So good. I think you're all very active, right? Okay, you're listening to me, good. So all these that you have mentioned, all right, are very, very important to learning, right? Apart from the learning itself, the willingness, the readiness to learn itself. I'm always fond of this quote, it is attributed to Osho, right? In his ashram, supposedly, you have this, quote, leave your mind and footwear outside. All right. As you enter, the abode of learning, you have to leave your mind and footwear outside. Right. So it's a very interesting quote, right? You have to keep an open mind. And I see that, in all those comments. Very good. So the first thing that we need to remember, especially when you're in the virtual space, is to draw the attention of the students, right? And especially at this time, the pandemic time, there are so many emotional problems, the turmoil that they go through. You never know, all right? They may have lost somebody in the family, or they may have lost their friends, right? And there's so much of pain and stress and agony, and how do we really draw them to this space, right? This virtual space, make them feel comfortable, right? Because if you don't create that learning environment, a conducive environment, then the alienation that they already face is going to be doubled. There's going to be more of detachment and more of distancing, and learning can not happen at all, right? So the first thing when we meet in the virtual space is to, kind of create that personal connection, all right? Because this is a very impersonal space, right? The virtual space, very impersonal. And we have to, connect ourselves, as teachers with our own learners, all right? So we have to be on the same page. You can follow many techniques, to do that. I mean, just to, demonstrate that, I asked you to, say something on the chat. I asked you a question. So constantly, you will have to keep in touch with them. And right now, let me tell you, I'm not going to use a PPT. Some of you may think, oh my God, right? How are we going to understand? Well, don't worry. It's nothing profound, as I said. I'm here to share my ideas, thoughts, and views, all right? So no sharing of PPT as such, right? So because sometimes I also feel, it's my personal opinion, of course, some of you may agree to it, some of you may disagree. Now, sometimes I feel that we are excessively using this, tool, PowerPoint, which in many ways is also a distraction. Right, as teachers of language and literature, I mean, we need to, transform our energy and rather transfer, our energy and enthusiasm to our students. So we need to, have that spirit of enthusiasm always displayed. PPT sometimes, can be a hindrance. And I don't know how many of you always go to your class with a PPT. Yeah, can somebody tell me, on the chat box? Do you always go with your PPT to class? Do you feel that you are handicapped without a PPT? you absolutely rely on PPT. Without it, you cannot teach. Is that so? Anybody who feels that way? Not always, okay? Sometimes, yes, definitely. Sometimes it can be very helpful, all right? But most of the time, I would say, that because students also remember, take us for granted when we, give them a PPT and they simply, copy whatever, is there and then reproduce. There's no real learning that happens. They need to listen to you, grasp what is happening, understand what is happening, and then, kind of scrutinize, examine, whatever we have conveyed to them. That's how real learning takes place, right? Anyway, so very quickly again, I'm going to ask you. So I'm sure, all of us here in this group are teachers. I presume that we're all faculty members because this program is titled, Faculty Development Program. So I'm just making that assumption. Can you just tell me what is the average number of years of experience that you have in teaching? Can you just put it down on the chat? 10, 15, 20, 30, 5 years, okay? 9, 10, okay, all right, 17, okay. That's huge, right? Yeah, I think so can I safely assume that 17 perhaps is the highest, all right? The longest duration looks like that. Yes. So you're all very young. All right. I didn't want to ask your age, you see. I said, okay, let me see the number of years of experience and I will know the kind of age group that we have. All right, good. So about 4 to 2 also we have. Okay, people have just begun as well. All right, good. 22. All right. Okay. I'm sure, there will be people with more number of years then. Okay. All right. So now tell me, in all these years of experience, right? You've had wonderful moments. You've had difficult moments also, I'm sure. Now, if I were to ask you this question, okay, tell me, pre-COVID, what was your impression of, or what was your idea of the role of a teacher? And post-COVID, of course, I can't say post-COVID because we really haven't gotten out of that. But still, right, we've come far away, about 18 months of experience of COVID, yeah? And then it's almost out. That's at least the hope that we have. So I'm using that word, very loosely, all right, the term post-COVID. So pre-COVID, post-COVID, what did you think was the role of a teacher in higher education space? I'm not talking about school, right? I'm talking about tertiary level of education. So what did you think was the role of a teacher? Maybe 1 or 2 things if you want. And post-COVID, do you see any change? If so, what does that change? Okay, we have an answer. Be a counselor along with being a mentor. All right, great. That's a great response. Yeah, anybody else? Realize values of life. Great, yes. Today we talk so much about value-based education. Empathetic, hardware shifted to software. All right. The value of teachers realized by everyone post-COVID. Good, yes. No, I mean, there could be differences there as well. I know the value of teachers, many people have realized, but there are also others, criticized, teachers of not doing enough. That's also important, yes. I used to be more of a trainer. After COVID, I have become a facilitator. Great. Very, very interesting responses. Yes. More use of technology. Yes. Technology is a double-edged sword. All right. It can be a big, big boom. Yeah. Sometimes it can be a big hindrance as well because, technology can divide as well. Right. I mean, normally we say, after, all these, advancement that we have made, all right, WhatsApp and Google and Google is God, we say anything and everything you ask and Google is going to give you. And people have been united, people who've been separated for, decades. Now they have, come together and they are, in touch with each other because of technology. Yes. But at the same time, you all know what has happened, in our own personal spaces, right? Even in our homes, so much of, distance, so much of gap, all right? 4 people in a family sitting in 4 different corners using mobile phones. talking to, friends miles and miles away and not really, making a connection, with people who are around. So many things have happened. Yes. So technology is a double-edged sword. Computers have become an integral part of teaching. Everything is digital. Yes, digitalized. Good mentor. Great, great. So all these are very interesting observations. And you're absolutely right. Each one is right. All right. I mean, I can't say this is right and this is wrong. All of these that you have listed out are very, very important things that have happened. And I'm good as teachers, we have realized, all of these things. So what you're saying, therefore, also leads us to the very important topic that, we're discussing today, right? We're talking about a shift, a pedagogical shift from text to hypertext. And of course, in the context of language and literature. And we also have this interesting term, digital natives. Now, for me, the key words are, of course, pedagogy, the word shift, text and hypertext, and digital natives, right? Very important words. Did I mention all of them? The entire title? Almost, yes. All right. But very interesting title. And I must, in fact, personally also congratulate, the team who's put this together, very, very interesting, very apt title to describe, what's happening today and what should be, happening, right? Now, let's look at pedagogy, right? The moment we say pedagogy, what comes to our mind? Anyone? Very quickly, one or two words. When I say pedagogy, or when we use the term pedagogy, what do we immediately think of? What strikes our mind immediately? Methodology, absolutely. Counseling, okay, I think some of those responses are in reference to the earlier one. Okay, teaching and learning, all right? Teaching and learning. Very interesting. That and is again very important. Yes. Teaching ways. All right. Okay. I'm sure there'll be lots more, but then these are some of the things that immediately come to our mind. The moment we say pedagogy, yes, we look at tools, we look at techniques, we look at methodology, we look at, so many things. Please remember, we need to go beyond that, especially in contexts like this, right? Now, if you're using a certain kind of methodology or a method, all right, in a larger, framework called methodology. Now, as teachers who are engaging students during the pandemic or any critical time, we also need to think very seriously the rationale, why we are doing what we are doing. The thinking that goes into the decision-making process itself, we need to consider, all these things. Why am I looking at this app? Why am I looking at this tool? How is it going to help? In what way is it going to be relevant? Is it going to be easy? Is it going to be so much of thinking? Online teaching, let me tell you, my dear friends and colleagues, it's not easy at all. It's not easy at all. There is a lot of work that we need to do as teachers, right? So when I say pedagogy, I refer to, in my mind, what I have is, it is the entire framework. It's not just about one or two tools. It's about the whole thinking process, right? Everything that is involved in this teaching and learning process. And when I use the word shift, I'm not just looking at the physical movement, from one phase to another, right? From the physical world to the virtual world, from the physical phase to the virtual space. No, not just that. Of course, that literal movement is there, very much there. But more importantly, it's about the mental readiness of teachers and students. The willingness, to make that shift, to make that transition. the agility, the alertness, that both students and the teachers must have in order to make that transition smoothly, right? So we're talking about both the literal kind of shift as well as the metaphorical shift, right? For me, the metaphorical, the figurative shift is very, very crucial, more important than the physical shift, because we're talking about adaptive resilience. I'm not sure if you have come across that term. We always talk about resilience. Every time there's a crisis, look, we need to be resilient. Yes, of course. But there's something called adaptive resilience also. Now, what does that mean? It just means beyond or apart from the readiness, the spirit, willing to do, it's also producing, the kind of results that are expected despite the disruptive forces that we may have. So that's called adaptive resilience. So this is the shift that we're looking at, right? And then text. Now, when we say text again, immediately, what will come to our mind? Okay, the textbook, all right, the book, the printed page. Of course, that is also true at one level. But as students of literature, we must remember that everything before us is a text, right? The screen that I see in front of me is a text. Of course, I'm not able to see any of you, but you are texts. People are texts. Students are text. A table is a text. A film is a text. And our students, learners, they're all texts, right? We're reading. Do you see that, important idea that I'm trying to drive home? So text, not necessarily the book that we are looking at. For me, text is anything and everything. We're reading every moment, even as you're listening to me. You're looking at me, listening to me, you're reading, all right? You're decoding, you're deciphering. There is that active engagement that is happening. We're reading. That's why these days we have visual texts also, right? In fact, we introduced that in our university some years ago. I'll come to that maybe a little later, yes. So we are texts, and our students are hypertexts too, right? And then when I say hyper, I'm not using the computing language here, right? I'm looking at the literal meaning of hyper as well, right? They're hyperactive, they're hypercritical, they're hypersensitive, so on and so forth. Hyper in everything, right? So there is a transformation that we're looking at in our students. So how are we going to deal with such students? These days, students, let me tell you, I don't know what kind of background you all teach in, right? Whether you're in cities or metropolises or towns, small towns, tier 2, tier 3, I don't know. I'm sure, you all come from, varied backgrounds. But then in general, we find these days youngsters, quite intelligent in that sense, right? Asking you a lot of questions and so on. They're very hyper, right? And shifting to this digital world is so much easier, for them. In fact, I'm sure you will agree with me. We learn a lot of things from them. Even now, I ask my son, for instance, for help, with regard so many technical requirements, right? I mean, they just, do it just like that, trial and error method. I mean, nobody really teaches them in that sense. So that is what we mean by digital natives also, right? So the next term that we're looking at is digital natives. Of course, many of you will know that this term was popularized in 2001 by somebody called Mark Prinsky. And in fact, he wrote an article, where he used this term, and he was accusing us teachers, all of us teachers, as being not really empathetic, not really understanding of the needs of modern students, right? Contemporary students. Perhaps he is right in some ways, because in many cases, as we say, we're still using the 20th century tools for the 21st century classrooms, right? Sometimes, we find it so difficult, to change. We don't want to change. We want to be in the comfort zone and so on, right? Although he was talking in the context of America and American students, I think this is applicable universally, right? We are still, in the process of changing ourselves. And this is a very good example of that, right? This faculty development program itself. Right. So now digital natives. Now, what do we mean by this term? This again is a very commonly used term. And then we always, refer to our students as digital natives, and we are all digital immigrants. All right. So can I have a few responses? One or two things that come to your mind when you say digital native. What do you understand by that term? Tech savvy, great, yes. Tech savvy, that's the first response I've got from Sandhya Shetty. Born with smartphones, all right, yes. Right, you're right, yes, right. These days, I think they can use phones even when they're in their mother's wombs, I mean, you never know. You may have an ad also like that, right? Yeah, they come with that, inborn, if I may use that term, right? Inborn quality. Yeah. All right. Digital part of their living, right? Digital becomes part of their living, inborn quality to handle gadgets. Great. Yes. Now, these are the things, that come to our mind immediately, right? Now, if you look up the net, you will find so many, things that people have talked about. They say these are the characteristics of digital natives. For instance, apart from what you have mentioned, they are constantly in the online world. That's one thing, that is attributed, to digital natives. They have the capacity to use digital technology so skillfully, very adept at it. And they always express, or rather, they are more comfortable expressing themselves in digital technology, right? Using digital technology or mediated by digital technology. And of course, they have lots of friends in the digital space as opposed to the real space. You never know, right? There's a difference. Plenty of friends in, Facebook and WhatsApp and whatnot. All right. And then they are a little comfortable, right? I want you to remember this word comfort, right? Comfortable in the online space. And they rely on, online spaces for many things, including, their texts, right? Even their textbooks, for instance, they may not really buy it, but then they, use library resources, online resources and so on. They're more comfortable, in the online space. And also they receive and process information at a very rapid, very fast, pace in comparison, I mean, we can't do that. We find it difficult to do that. So these are, some of the qualities, characteristics of a digital native. Now, the question to all of us is, okay, now all of these things put together, does it amount to the fact that when we meet them online, when we try to transact our business online, that they are therefore necessarily likely to like what we're doing? Am I confusing you? What I'm trying to ask you is, because they have these qualities, the comfort space that they have in the digital space, does it automatically translate into liking what we do, enjoying what we do in the digital space? That is a question. I hope this is slightly better. Any answer? Yes or no? Why? N, right? Response. Okay, no, no, no. All right, great. Their freedom and space when it's not disturbed. No, no. Right. I'm glad I get lots of no's, right? Yes. Absolutely not. Right? Because they are digital natives, it doesn't necessarily mean that they're going to like what we do. So which means the point that I'm trying to drive home is what, therefore, as teachers, are we going to do? Because sometimes we take it for granted. Look, I mean, you all enjoy being in the digital space. So you must obviously like online classes. Really? I mean, what kind of a connection is that? Right? So the teacher's role is absolutely crucial. Let me tell you, the pandemic has actually helped us teachers in some ways. In fact, it has strengthened this belief, this conviction that you cannot replace a teacher, right? Earlier, if you remember, many people must have thought, oh my God, the world is going to change radically. We're going to have online teaching. We're going to have MOOCs and, SWAYAM courses, and the virtual university is going to take over. Teachers are going to become redundant, so on and so forth, all kinds of ideas. But let me tell you, this pandemic has been an eye-opener in that sense. Now they know a teacher can never be replaced, right? But for the teacher, no real learning can happen, right? So anyway, now coming back to, our topic of discussion. So what I thought was keeping this, a topic that has been given, we're going to discuss, within that framework, a very important idea that I wanted to share with you. Therefore, my topic, I don't know whether it has been communicated to you. This is what I would like to discuss in the remaining, time that we have. By the way, I would like to, conclude my talk at least by 3:30, so that we can have 30 minutes at least, for discussion, because I really want to discuss with you, right? It shouldn't be a monologue. That's why I'm trying to have at least some chat interaction in between. So let's see, about 30 minutes at least at the end, we can have some discussion. You can shoot me with your questions. Okay, now, so my topic is living in the virtual world. It's a given now. We don't know for how long. It is going to be there for some more time, right? So living in the virtual world, realities, challenges, and choices, right? So that is what we're going to discuss, okay? Living in the virtual, that's a compulsion now. We need to understand the realities and what are the challenges that we're facing and what are the choices that we need to make. So that is what we're going to discuss. And I hope you will find it useful, right? Because we're going to discuss in a larger kind of perspective, because I'm sure, in the last 4 days, you would have heard from my colleagues, so many techniques and methods and apps and, softwares that you can use. Of course, I will also be touching upon them, but not in a very, great detail, right? Okay. Now, context is absolutely important. All right. When we, try to understand a problem, and when we are attempting, a solution to that problem, the context is absolutely crucial, right? How good is our virtual space? The first question that we need to ask ourselves is this: how good is our virtual space? How effective are the tools that we use in the classroom? The virtual tools that we use, the online tools. Do we have students with problems in accessibility, for instance? How robust is our technological infrastructure, maybe at home or in the campus? In India, particularly, right? I'm talking in the context of India, of course. This is the program is being organized in association with a Malaysian university. That's fine. But then, since I do presume again, that most of the participants are from India. So the Indian context, right? So my discussion is going to revolve around this. So the why of it, rather than the how of it, right? So that's what I'm going to discuss, the why of things and not really about the how of things, right? And this is also a valedictory session. So in a sense, this will sum up, right, many of the things that you've discussed already. But of course, I'm going to question, some of the assumptions that we may have, right? So this interaction is going to be in that sense, very broad-based, all right, and looking at things in a holistic manner, all right? So let's come to the first part, realities. Let's talk about our own situation. Think about it, recall, right? Now, we always say that we live in a VUCA world. I'm sure you all know what that means, right? VUCA, V-U-C-A, right? VUCA world. Can somebody tell me what that means? How do you expand this acronym, right? VUCA, V-U-C-A. Volatile, great. Yes, and U stands for? Can you guess? Come on, take a wild guess. Volatile is right. So U stands for what? Okay, no one. C stands for what? Utility, all right. Uncertainty, right, but not utility. Right, uncertainty, absolutely, yes. Then C, come on, quickly. Complexity, great, yes. And last, A. Somebody, yes. You have volatility, uncertainty, complex, absurdity, that's great. Yes, ambiguity, yes, right. I like that answer, absurdity. Of course, this time is like that. Absurd drama, theater of the absurd is what, comes to our mind. Yes. Okay. Anyway, great. Yes. Thanks for, all those responses. Yes. So we live in a VUCA world, right? So volatility is there. Uncertainty is there. Complexity is there. Ambiguity is there. Right. This was, in fact, you probably would know that this was first used in 1987. Somebody called, in fact, two people, Warren Bennis and Bert Manus. They coined this term, using some of the leadership theories, that existed then. So the VUCA world, all right, and definitely, applicable to our time as well. And this VUCA, world, please remember the complexity, the uncertainty, so on and so forth, they have been further accentuated by the COVID-19 pandemic, right? So that we must always remember. So COVID-19, we always say it has been a life-altering experience for many of us, personally, professionally. We are stuck in our homes, in a sense, right? So we are caged, right? In our homes, right? And sometimes, when I think about this, I'm reminded of Homi Bhabha's, the unhomely, right? Home and unhomely, right? Coexisting, right? Unhomely. That is a kind of, thinking that we all have. But the point is, it has been a life-altering experience, great. For teachers like us, has it been a mind-altering experience? That is my question. All right. Has it been able to change our thinking? Pedagogy, for instance, right? So that's a question. What is the change that this pandemic has helped us achieve or look at? All right. Let me tell you, I'm sure all of you would agree with me. We were caught, all of us, we were caught unawares. Let's be honest about it. Every one of us, we were not prepared at all. We jumped on the online bandwagon in a hurry because there was a compulsion. We need to do that, right? Our managements told us, our principals told us, look, we have to go on. We cannot stop. Why? What are the reasons? From my point of view, I have at least three important reasons. One, of course, the brand name of the institution, right? We need to protect it. Our management would have said, look, I mean, see, what will parents say? What will society say? What will students think? We need to show that we can go on despite all these difficulties. Fine. No harm in that, yes. So protection of the brand name. Second thing is the mindset that we all have to complete portions. right? Because when the pandemic struck us, we didn't know how long this is going to last, right? We thought, okay, maybe a few months, right? And then, what will we do? If we're going to lag, behind, we need to complete portions. So the Indian mindset is always to cover, not discover, right? You get the point, right? We want to cover portions. We want to complete portions, but we are not worried about the real purpose of learning, discovery. Anyway, so that's the second point. And the third point is financial security, especially if you're, somebody from a private organization or a private institution. There was always that compulsion. Look, I mean, we are answerable to our parents, all right? One of the important stakeholders, yes, all right? So we need to tell them, look, we are doing our way, because otherwise what happens to our faculty? What happens to the teachers? We have to pay them, right? These are all practical issues. I'm not actually finding fault with any of these. Please remember, I'm simply stating that we were compelled to do it because of these reasons, right? We didn't have the capacity. Let me tell you. In fact, what we're doing right now is also a capacity building program. All right. How many institutions rarely had training sessions, capacity building programs, before they actually, got onto this online, portal, online medium? Tell me, very few. I'm sure some of them would have done it, right? But still, not many. So we jumped, onto this, bandwagon, and these are the reasons, right? So what did we do? Therefore, instead of adapting, we wanted to replicate. That's the worst of all the tragedies, right? Without understanding the nuances, the intricacies of the online, medium, the virtual space, the virtual world, we entered it and we simply, started replicating all that we did in the physical world, right? That's a tragedy. Very important. So the platform changed, but not our methods. Even there, we were doing the same old thing that we were doing, the lecture method or whatever, irrespective of the fact, what the students are going through as they're listening. In fact, if you remember those early days when the online medium was being used, extensively, there were lots of, jokes. I mean, teachers sometimes would not realize till, 1 hour of the lecture that students never got to listen to them, all right? After 2 hours of lecture, one student, messages, I mean, at 2.08 seconds, we lost you. and 2 hours you've been talking, right? So what I'm trying to drive home, again, please remember, my dear friends, right? We had to adapt, but we never did that. Most of us, we simply replicated. The platform changed, but not our methods. And we can't blame ourselves for that because we were not prepared for it. We did not understand the context. And instead of innovating, we just stuck to the routine, right? So that's a problem. And the result is there for us to see. If you look at the recent research papers that are published, at least about 70% of learning gap is there, all right, in our students. I don't know whether this number is to be taken so seriously, but definitely there's going to be at least 50-60% of learning gap, right? And these are the common problems: lack of smartphones, lack of internet access, power issues, special issues. How many students, can really have a space in their own homes? Even teachers, forget the students, even teachers. Were teachers really, ready to make that kind of a shift? I have heard from teachers saying, sir, there is a power problem, power cut. I don't know how am I going to, but, are we prepared to make some extra efforts, extra, steps to make sure that these things are available? Right? I mean, these are questions that we need to ask ourselves. That is the situation. So how are we going to overcome the difficulties? So these are the results, right? Even in the so-called digital Kerala, some of you may know when the former president, Pranab Mukherjee, he declared in 2016 that Kerala, is the digital, Kerala, the state in the whole of India, which has become completely digital and so on. And you read about what happened, right? Students climbing onto trees, trying to get network connection and so on. If that is the state there, which is supposed to be digital, completely digital, look at some of the other states, some of our students, right? So that's a harsh reality, right? So that's why I said I'm going to play the devil's advocate here. All right. Of course, all these days you must have listened to so many of our, friends and teachers and colleagues, saying these are the methods that we can use. Definitely. But then this is the harsh reality. And look at our own gross enrollment ratio in India. What is the gross enrollment ratio? According to the latest report, it is 27.4, 27.4% in higher education, right? And let me tell you, this is very, very small compared to so many other countries, right? Take the US, for instance, because for many things we compare, ourselves to or with US, right? In fact, many of these methods and other things we, try to, take it from them. But then look at the difference, radically different. US, do you know the gross enrollment ratio? Anybody? Come on. I don't want you to, come on, anyone? I want to see whether you're all awake. Does anyone know? Say yes or no, no problem. You don't have to give me the number if you don't know. Yeah? I think. Okay. So I haven't got any response. In the US, let me tell you, it's 88.2%. Look at the difference, right? We are 27.4 and they are 88.2%. And Germany, for instance, 70.3%, France, 65.6%, so on and so forth. Now, my point is very simple. We have a small number of students, therefore, right? And yet we're not able to give free access, right? They're not able to access, these facilities. That is the reality. Please remember, ironically, even for these small numbers, in fact, there are only two nations, which this paper talks about, which are below us, our country, our nation, right? That's India. Now, what are these two countries? South Africa, surprisingly, it's only 22.4%, and Pakistan, it's about 9.4%, right? But definitely we are very, very, slow in comparison to other, Western and advanced countries. Anyway, the point is this, right? So even for this number, we are unable to give access, and we are unable to carry out our, transactions, our business with them uninterrupted. There's no seamless kind of delivery of online engagement there. I don't know whether you remember when we started this online thing, even students from IIT protested. Many IITs and many of the well-known, well-established institutions, students protested. They talked about so many issues, right, they were facing. So that is a very important point that we have to remember. So the major question is, now, is it teaching or learning that we are looking at in the online space? Or is it teaching versus learning that is happening? Or is it teaching and learning that should happen, right? That's why I said, when somebody said teaching and learning, that and is very important, right? In most cases, let me tell you, it is more importance given to teaching and not really learning. Many a time, we really don't ask ourselves, has learning really happened? Many a time you will find teachers coming out of the class, oh my God, yes, I've done a great job. I've taught them this, right? Teaching has happened. But then teaching can never really happen if there's no learning, right? You may think that you have done your job. You may think that you've given a wonderful lecture, right? So that's a question. So what is being given primacy? Is it teaching or learning? So the online medium definitely has its own advantages, no doubt about it. But are we able to make the best use of them? That is a question. You may have hundreds of apps available, but what can be used in our own context, right? There are so many benefits, no doubt about it, right? Theoretically, potential is there. For instance, people talk about anytime, any space, anywhere. All right, great, including the trees. All right. Anyway, so that is one advantage. Yes, we do have. And of course, if there are facilities, good facilities available, you can have a lot of synergy, that you can establish in an online classroom. No doubt about it. A lot of synergy is possible. And today we talk about synchronous and asynchronous, learning, so on and so forth. We can use it effectively, no doubt about it. But basic requirements have to be met, right? Various methods today people talk about. In fact, let me tell you, after this pandemic, thousands of papers, research papers are published, right? On these several topics that we're discussing, the methods that you can use, the apps that you can use, so on and so forth. We talk about flipped classroom. Of course, this is not new, but today, we're talking more of, these techniques, flipped classroom, blended learning methods, videos and films, recordings, hybrid or mixed method. People talk about blogs. I don't know how many of you have blogs, and today we have vlogs as well, and YouTube channels, podcasts, and MOOCs, and our own Swayam is there. We have Moodle, a lot of LMS, right? Learning management system. People have websites, personal websites, and we also sometimes use WhatsApp and Facebook and all, for these purposes. So plenty of, opportunities available. And in fact, I have heard some students tell me that the online space gives them a sense of anonymity, and therefore they're free. They say, we may not have expressed this in the physical space, but the online space gives us some kind of anonymity, and therefore, we also open up. Possible, because each student is different, right? So that's also good thing, as long as they're able to open up and tell us what they really think and feel. So anonymity is also a positive thing. These are all good things. Yes, possible. The synergy, especially, teacher can spend more time with students and so on, right? Special attention also can be given, but the challenges are more, especially in our context. And if you read some of the articles, you will know what I'm talking about, and all the literature that is available on these recent developments. They talk about the difficulties like, adjusting difficulty to the new situation, connectivity problems, network and internet issues, unconducive atmosphere at home, or not a very conducive environment around, mental health related issues. My dear friends, please remember, this is again, people talk about, anxiety and depression and so on and so forth. Are we teachers, empathetic? Somebody mentioned the word empathy, right? I mean, do we really, pay attention to some of these difficulties that they go through? So lack of teaching and learning resources, right? These are the major challenges. In fact, in our university, we brought out a book, right? The Department of English and Cultural Studies, we published a book titled Lock Tales, right? Lock Tales. And all the faculty members of the department, contributed to this collection. And I thought I will share with you at least, one or two excerpts, from these, pieces that were written. That will give you an idea as to how the online, has panned out. The online world has panned out, for our teachers. I'm talking about teachers, right? For instance, two of our faculty members, they wrote a short piece called Maya, Sat, and Sahitya, right? It's a very short piece. And the quote is very, very important, especially women teachers, lady teachers, for instance, the kind of difficulties that they went through. I quote, in between the whistles, right, of pressure cooker, squeezed in lunches, and family peeping into our small computer screens, as our worlds invaded each other, as the strange became the new norm, both students and teachers embraced this newness. We pretended we were used to it, right? I mean, it was a pretension, right? To a large extent. You know, the pressure cooker, whistle heard, and then, your family members walking up and down perhaps, and very, very curiously peeping into the computer screens and so on. You all must have heard about this, right? That more than the students, the parents attended many of the classes, right? Anyway, so that's just one example, right? The kind of difficulties that we had to go through. And then some institutions, including ours, we wanted to change, the assessment, for instance, online assessment. Instead of having the routine, 3-hour exam, we said we will also have a Viva component and so on, just to make sure that students, do well, and also, to test whether they've really done it, right? Because in online medium, lots and lots of malpractices were happening. We knew it, right? Even now it is happening. So this teacher, very interesting, short poem he wrote, right? Online Viva during pandemic. And he says, my teacher announced the result. I got this, of course, the student's point of view, right? My teacher announced the result. I got a 0. My mother took me to task. While I thought that I had answered all the questions perfectly correctly, what could have gone wrong? Did I not read the question right? Was my answer incorrect? Did the teacher not hear me? And now I don't know whom to ask. You see, now that is the comedy of errors, right? I mean, the student thinks that he has done absolutely great, but then what he gets is a 0. And he's asking himself, did I not read the question right? Or did not the teacher hear me correct? Who's to be blamed, right? I mean, it's a very interesting question, right? But that's a fact, right? Because of technology, right? I mean, even now as we're discussing, there are so many disruptions, right? You may not even hear me at times. I don't know whether I'm going to get this connection, throughout, stable, right? So all these, sorts are there. So we need to be aware of it. So equity, accessibility, are we, ensuring that all of our students, have it? What is the role of the institution here? These are questions that we need to ask ourselves, right? There could be various reasons, of course, why students don't have this. Mostly economic reasons, we all know, right? Perhaps logistics as well. But what I'm trying to tell you is that there is an exclusion here. There is a set of students, there's a group of students which is excluded from this learning process, right? And of course, computer literacy itself, even now, I mean, we call ourselves, as I said, digital immigrants. How many of us, were really comfortable and familiar with the systems, the online world? Some of us may have taken some classes, yes, but mostly no, right? The seniors in particular, and you take your own institution, right? People who have worked for 25, 30 years, they may not be very comfortable. They may not be tech savvy. And it was a huge, difficult, exercise for them to, understand and exercise this, new learning, right? Computer literacy. And especially in rural areas again, right? Very, very difficult. So for this to, succeed, we need to have students as well as teachers with at least the minimum level of computer literacy. Of course, technology we cannot rely on, 100%, yes. And also, very importantly, students have to be self-disciplined, right? If you have observed in your own online classes, those students who are self-disciplined, mature, self-motivated, they would find this a very interesting, exercise, right? Online medium. It'll be effective for them. But for those students who are dependent, there will be students like that, because in a class, you're going to have all kinds of students, right? So for those students who are dependent, yes, this is not appropriate at all. It's very difficult for them to really learn. So teachers also, we need to be trained. That's why I asked that question in the beginning. How many of our institutions actually gave us training? Because we're not going to be physically present in the class. How are we going to compensate for the lack of physical presence? What is the supportive environment that we're going to create? Right? Because students have to feel comfortable, because interaction is absolutely important between the teacher and the student. And another important thing, how did we look at the curriculum? Right? Again, I'm going back to the same point. We just jumped into it. We didn't adapt. Did we modify the curriculum? Did we change the syllabus in any way to suit the different conditions? No, many of us didn't. Let's be honest, right? So these are the difficulties that we faced and continue to face. These are the challenges. But can we say, okay, so what? We'll stop everything? No, we have to go on. How are we going to go on? That is a question. How are we going to change ourselves? We need to upskill. No doubt about that, right? We need to adapt to the new situation. As I said earlier, all of us, despite the age, right? You may be about to retire, but still, you're going to be part of the system for some more time. And therefore, keep an open mind to change. And these disruptions will continue to happen, but the relevance of the teacher is very, very important. Now, coming to the context of literature and language, right? Why do we, see, sometimes what we do is we always, borrow ideas from other teachers who belong to other disciplines. This has worked well, in that class, so it should work well here too. No, not necessarily, right? And the way we teach, and also the disciplinary difference also has to be kept in mind. And we're talking about, in our context, language and literature, right? Now, teaching literature can be very enjoyable, and it can be a terrible tragedy also, right? It all depends on us. How do we take it to the classroom? Why do we teach literature? That's the first question that we have to ask ourselves, right? To the digital natives in particular, yes. But teaching literature in general, why do we teach, right? We need to make them love what they're reading, let me tell you, right? It's not just, going and, transmitting or transferring some knowledge. No, we need to make them love what they're reading. We need to make them think critically. We need to introduce them to the past in order to know the present and devise ways for the future, right? We need to motivate them to become engaged with contemporary social issues, political issues. We need to help them to make educated guesses about the ones that will come in future also problems. So the moot question is, in the era of technology, many people have expressed this, concern. Have we already dehumanized the whole process, right? I mean, these are, very human kind of interactions that we're talking about, right? And this technology that we're using, is it actually dehumanizing the whole thing? Possible in some ways. We need to be aware of that. So what is the purpose of teaching literature? Once we have that clear in our mind, then the methods and the techniques and tools that we're going to use also will largely, contribute to that learning outcome that we have in mind. For instance, Joseph Conrad, I'm sure, are familiar with his writings. And in The Beggar of the Narcissus, he talks about the role of the artist. It's a very interesting thing. I love that, argument that he has. He kind of compares, artists with thinkers and scientists, right? He says all these people are seekers of truth. Thinkers, scientists, artists, all seeking truth. But they look for truth in different places, he says, right? For instance, one looks at truth in concepts, ideas. abstractions. These are thinkers, philosophers, and so on. And the scientists look for truth in perhaps laboratories, in facts, in tangible things. And he says the artist looks for truth within, right? It's a human, endeavor, absolutely human, right? You don't go outside of yourself. You look for this inside or within, right? The condition of the human is very, very important. And this is very important for us as teachers of literature. We need to remember, because he goes on, to say, I would like to quote that for you. It's a very interesting quote. I want you to remember this. He says, the artist speaks to our capacity for delight and wonder, to the sense of mystery surrounding our lives. Look at these words, no? The diction is very important. Capacity for delight and wonder, to the sense of mystery surrounding our lives, to our sense of pity and beauty and pain, to the latent feeling of fellowship with all creation, and to the subtle and invincible conviction of solidarity that knits together the loneliness of innumerable hearts, to the solidarity in dreams, in joy, in sorrow, in aspirations, in illusions, in hope, in fear. Look at the opposites, right? But all of them put together, which binds men, he says, of course, men, you don't have to take it literally, all right, people today, all right, human beings, which binds men to each other, which binds together all humanity. And the following, sentence is very, very important, right? He says, which binds together all humanity, the dead to the living and the living to the unborn, right? It might sound, of course, very nice to, hear, but beyond that, please remember, what is the meaning? This is what literature should do. This is why we teach literature, right? And Muriel Spark, another interesting writer, according to this author, novels are an imaginative extension of the truth. Extension of the truth, very important. And Tennessee Williams, another interesting playwright, right? He says, when he was asked, why do you write? And he says, I write because I found life unsatisfactory. Look at these answers, right? These are the purposes of, teaching literature, right? So how are we going to therefore, devise our ways? That is what I'm trying to drive home. So the personal connection is absolutely crucial. And of course, we're going to miss largely all of these in the virtual world, your gestures, your body language, the constant and continuous kind of interaction that you probably will have in the physical space. It's not going to be there. And you may not even get to see your students, right? So how are we going to establish that connection? Specific teaching strategies we need to have. Of course, chat box is one thing, that you can always have. Now, apart from that, what I'm suggesting when you teach literature, now, especially in this context, films can be great help, right? Of course, you cannot watch it in during the class, right? But you can always give them time. Asynchronous method actually helps in this, right? You tell them, this is what they can watch. Perhaps you can, show a few clips. That's possible, right? If the connection is good again, right? But then if it is not good, you can always send the recording, because these days we record all our classes as well. Ultimately, every student must get to see, what has transpired in the classroom, right? So film, can be a great source, let me tell you, right? And in fact, today, film as a medium, as a product, has been largely accepted, as a very important teaching tool. That's why I said we used years ago, what we call visual text. We introduced, instead of a text, printed text, visual text, a film was prescribed, and then they had to watch the film, they had to discuss the film, and they had to write an exam as well, right? I mean, answering questions from the film, right? So visual text is a very important thing. And today's students, we say digital natives, and therefore they have a strong visual culture, right? They're more into the visual medium, right? So they probably would like to see things, right? They're used to seeing things. And Shakespeare, for instance, to give you an example, he can be taught through films, right? Absolutely, right? And even play like what should I say? Macbeth, right? A tragedy, or Hamlet, right? How many of you know that Lion King, the movie The Lion King, was actually based on Hamlet, right? It was based on Hamlet. Shakespeare can be, taught in many ways. Or take this film. I don't know how many of you have seen this film. Have you seen, just say yes or no, please, Dead Poets Society? Have you seen? No. Okay, you must watch Manusha. Oh, I get many no's. Oh my God, no, 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 no. I don't accept this no. Right? I want you to watch this film at the earliest, let me tell you, because we're all teaching literature, and it's called Dead Poets Society. Let me, key it in for you. Dead Poets Society. Robbins Williams is the lead, actor here. Now, you must watch this film, right? You will really understand what literature is all about, or teaching of literature is all about, right? In fact, there are at least 3 important scenes there, all right? He talks about how to read and understand poetry, right? There is one scene where he is asking the student to read, from a particular essay written by somebody called J. Evans Pritchard, PhD, a doctor who has, talked about poetry. If you want to understand poetry, then you must know what meter, you must know what rhythm, you must know what this, that, and so on. Very, kind of a typical kind of a dissection that happens. All right. Dissection. Now, I want you to understand this word dissection, right? It usually is done in a laboratory, right? And there's a beautiful example again by Osho. Osho was asked, how do you, differentiate between analysis and, or rather, intellect and intelligence, right? Intellect and intelligence. And it's a beautiful answer that he gives. He says, you go ask a science student, how do you understand a rose flower, right? A rose flower. Describe the rose flower to me. So what will the student do, science student? Because he's been trained that way. So he will get into the mode of dissection, right? He will say, okay, cut this. This is, petal, right? This is cut this. This is stalk. This is stem, whatnot, all right? And put them all in different bottles and label them, stalk, stem, petal, so on and so forth. That's his understanding of rose, right? Can't blame him, because that's how, he's been trained. You ask somebody else, maybe from a literature background or so, what is a rose flower, or describe the rose flower to me. How he or she is supposed to do? He or she will look at the whole thing, the flower in its entirety. Because what makes the rose flower so significant and important is not the parts, but the sum of the parts, and not even the sum, more than the sum, right? What is that called? Beauty. The beauty of the flower. That is how you're going to describe. That is how you understand a rose flower. That is the beauty of that, right? Because the moment you dissect, beauty disappears. So beauty is in the wholeness of things, not in parts, right? So look at the kind of understanding that, we are supposed to have. That's why we always talk about holistic approach to things. So you cannot achieve things by dissection. So that's what he says, Osho. He says intellect is analysis, dissection. Intelligence is synthesizing, unifying, bringing things together. And that's how we need to understand the world, right? So that's one scene, that you have in the film where he's asking to read, and this is what reads. And the teachers rip out that page. And all students actually do it. They rip out, that page, because that's not the way to read and appreciate poetry. And then there's another scene, where it talks about, seize the day, carpe diem. I know you probably would have come across this, carpe diem, right? Seize the day. And there's another scene, where he tells them, that the play is being played out, and you have a chance to contribute. The play here, of course, refers to life itself, right? And you have a chance to contribute. What will your verse be, right? I must tell you again, please watch this film, right? Because a good film can be a great source for our students, right? A good film is never a constraint, right? It actually, helps, it actually enhances, it actually augments it. So please do that. All right, so films, even some clips, even these 3 scenes that I told you, if you bring it to your classroom and show them, I'm sure your students are going to learn a lot more, about these works than, from other things. So the point is, we are here as teachers, to augment or enhance or broaden, students' horizons, right? And films can really do that. And then plays, Shakespeare's plays, you have a lot of movies these days, you can use that, right? And yes, I think what I told you, 3:30, right? So a few more minutes. So let me, conclude, right? See, another thing is you can look at what is called service learning assignment, right? In fact, I read recently an article where the professor talks about giving this assignment, service learning. I suppose you understand. I don't know how many of you are familiar with this concept of service learning technique. See, there's this paper, if you get a chance, read that. It's called Dickens and Public Humanities, a service learning approach. This is the title of that paper. And then the teachers talked about how the students were made to actually do the work. All right. For instance, I think what is being taught in that class was Victorian literature, right? Dickens, for instance, because he has talked and many of his novels about the problems that the downtrodden, the underprivileged face. So the assignment, the technique, that the teacher is talking about here is real work for real people, right? See, many times what happens is we read about these things in fiction and, novels and so on. There's no connection. But here, what the teacher has done is making them go to the real world, observe and, do some kind of work, right? It could be even a study, right? But getting the connection with the real world, that's very important, right? So real work for real people. So that is the service learning technique that, the teachers talked about. So films, service learning technique, collaborative learning assignments. Today, let me tell you, my dear friends, collaboration is a key word, right? Whether it is research or even teaching or learning for that matter. Learning happens the best through this way, right? Collaborative learning assignments. That's a very important strategy that you can, use. So bring students together, give them problems, multiple solving, problem solving exercise you can do. It makes them think critically. And for me, literature, you must be able to make them think critically. Be independent. When I go to a class, where I need to teach a poem, for instance, if the first thing that I tell them is, I have 50 students here. I need 50 different interpretations. I don't want one answer. There's no one answer. There can never be one answer. We're not in that discipline where 2 + 2 is always 4. No. Right? So independent, critical thinking, and that's how, they learn. We need to trigger discussions. And that's what is called high impact learning. And that is the ultimate success of teaching, let me tell you, right? So our pedagogy, therefore, will largely depend on the outcomes of the course. So you must, for instance, as teachers, okay, this is what I want to achieve at the end of the course. These are the learning outcomes. And therefore, I follow these strategies, these methods, right? Because they have to sync, right? Your learning outcomes and the methods that you're going to use. And similarly for language teaching also, I'm sure, in the last 4 days, you've heard so many people talk about things. My own colleagues, who specialize in this, they are using worksheets, a lot of worksheets they use, and breakout rooms you can have. I don't know whether you're familiar with that. I'm sure all of these platforms give you that, facility, right? You can have small groups, breakout rooms. And there are apps like Pedagogical and Padlet, which gives you, of course, restricted access these days. Earlier, it was quite free, but now they're restricting that as well. And, what you can do is when you have, these breakout rooms, you can visit as a teacher, all of these rooms, and then you can interact, with the students in smaller groups, right? Which helps them, gives them that space to talk, discuss, debate, so on and so forth, right? And all of these platforms, WebEx or Google Meet, and all of these, platforms give you that facility, right? And if you want to have a quiz or a one-word answer, a short answer, you can always use Mentimeter. I'm sure you're familiar with that as well, right? Mentimeter is there. So these are all, whether it is language or literature, plenty of options are available. But then ultimately you will have to decide, for yourself, what is your context, right? Somebody who is living in a metropolitan city, somebody who is living in a rural space, right? There has to be a big difference in your method, right? You will have to choose based on your context. And of course, what the learning outcomes are, right? What is the learning outcome that you're looking at from this course, from this piece that I'm going to teach, so on and so forth. So ultimately, a few points for us to remember. Always keep the classroom active, right? Please engage with them throughout, because you never know what they're doing behind the screen, right? You will see the name there. You may not be, they may not be there really, right? So always, have some techniques, maybe call out, ask them a few questions. These are all simple things, yes, but many of us don't do it because we are more interested in finishing, right? Otherwise, how am I going to complete the portion, right? So that's another important thing. So keep it always active and ensure that the course material is diverse and relatable, connected to, things. Let me tell you, as teachers of English language and literature, we can talk about anything under the sun, right? We have that scope, and make it interesting, therefore, connected, related to what's happening around us. So replace traditional ways, traditional, methods, including exams. Look at innovative ways, newer ways of assessment, right? Because I tell you, you follow the traditional method, we're going to be taken for a solid ride, right? Malpractices of all kinds. There's exam and other things. And in fact, in many cases, students have even complained that there should be no proctoring, because that invades into their privacy. Because human proctoring means, going to tell them, look, face the camera, look this way, turn the computer, to this direction and so on. So students say, look, you cannot do this. This is invasion, right? So anyway, so we need to look at newer ways, all right? How do we change the entire approach? How do we change our assessment practices, right? And we need to track students' progress continuously and intervene as and when required. These are very, very important points that we will have to remember. Okay, now, what is the future, right? I'm sure this COVID pandemic is going to continue for some time. I might sound, a little pessimistic when I say that, but let's be real, right? At least it's not going to allow us to come back to the pre-COVID times in the near future. So mostly we're going to look at a hybrid model, right? A hybrid model is what we're going to look at. Sorry, just. Okay, this is the alarm I had set for 3:30. Yes. So, hybrid model is what we probably will have to follow for some time, right? So I want you to be aware of that. And hybrid model, I'm sure, the mixed, method model that we have, some students will be physically present and those students from homes, because they're not able to attend physically, they will be attending class online. So how are we going to make, this happen? There are many things that we need to remember there as well, because we need to cater to both groups. And there are difficulties, practical difficulties there, right? How are we going to overcome all those difficulties? So how are we going to change our practices? That is one thing. Are we going to continue on the same 9 to 4 model or 10 to 5 model? I mean, these are some thoughts I'm going to leave you with, right? Because this pandemic is such a huge thing, a big deal for us. And this experience should necessarily teach us something to teachers like us. Is it a good method, really? This continuous kind of 9 to 4, 10 to 5 class that we have? Are we going to follow the same routine? Are we going to incorporate some kind of technology into our own teaching practices, learning practices, as make them more, exciting and so on? So to what extent can we incorporate, all these technologies that we have learned during these days, right? Are they going to help us? To what extent can we use technology and so on, right? So these are some of the things I want you to think about, right? Because as teachers, we should be ready to make that shift, right? So in this, of course, students, teachers, and the administration, your college or institution, whichever institution that you belong to. Now, all of them have a very important say, very important role. Because as teachers, we also need to take those extra steps. Students also will have to contribute. They also need to take those extra steps. And of course, the institution, the college, right? Because they need to provide some kind of infrastructure which will facilitate, all these, things happen seamlessly, right? Otherwise, the exercise of this online, learning will largely be a farcical exercise, right? It may not really help us much. So I'm just trying to tell you that these are the things that we need to remember if you want this to be a successful thing. Let me just conclude this with this WhatsApp forward that I received recently. Very interesting, forward. A group of engineering students, some of you may have got this, right? A group of engineering students and their teacher were given free airplane tickets to go on a holiday. So once on the plane, the captain announced that they were on the plane the students had built. Everyone freaked and rushed out of the plane, except for the teacher, who stayed there with calm. When the flight attendant asked why he hadn't left, he responded, "I know the abilities of my students. This plane won't even start." Right? So that is the forward that I got. I'm sure many of you would have got this as well. So what I want you to think, about this, of course, it's funny, right? It's humorous. But then as teachers, excuse me, we need to ask ourselves, who's in the wrong here, right? Who's at fault? Is it the teacher's fault that the students haven't learned? Or is it the student's fault? Or both have to be blamed? Or both together, can we blame the system? Right? So these are very important questions. So if the teacher remains calm, of course, we all think, oh my God, the teacher is so confident of the teachers. I mean, students, that's what you think. But then the teachers, I know the plane won't even start, right? So we very interesting and very important questions, very relevant questions, right? So let me leave all of you with that thought, right? Now, who's to be blamed? Are we going to blame the system? Are we going to blame ourselves? Are we going to blame the students? Are we going to blame the technology that's available to us? Right? Are we going to look at ways to overcome all of these difficulties? Disruptions will happen, but then how are we going to surmount all these difficulties? So let me leave you with that interesting and important thought. Now I'm open to questions, your comments, and your suggestions, right? So that is what I wanted to share with you. I hope I have made some sense, and I really hope that some of these things at least, would be useful to you. And don't forget this, please. Let me remind you once again, watch that film, right? Watch that film, Dead Poet Society. Yes, your questions, please.
Dear participants, kindly put your questions in the chat box.
Yeah, you can use the chat box. It may not be a question, your comment, right? Not that all the time we have to ask questions. Questions are welcome. Yeah, thank you very much. Okay, practical difficulties, absolutely, yes. Thank you for that. Now, it can be difference of opinion as well. After all, we're talking about literature, please, and we're all literature teachers. Not that you have to agree with me, to everything that I say. Okay, as well as to the mind. Great to know that. Oh, I wish we could continue, yes, but then, time restrictions there, right? What's my opinion regarding the last question? Okay, who's to be blamed? All right, I think the prime responsibility, this is my personal view, right? The prime responsibility of making the learning process happen effectively relies on the teacher. All right, of course, both are to be pitied, fine, yes, and helped. But then who has a major say in that? See, a student comes to the class with a certain kind of expectation, right? And the teacher is there, presumably, again, I'm using that word very carefully, with some knowledge, more knowledge that the student does not have, right? So it is the teacher's responsibility to transfer that. Of course, these are debatable points. In fact, today, there is a view, and I do agree, to that, point of view. We can't think of teachers as walking encyclopedias, all-knowing, omniscient beings. No, certainly not. And then we have come far away, from that, position where we thought teachers are repositories of knowledge, right? Once upon a time, we used to think like that. Teachers know everything. No, right? We're not repositories of knowledge. We're also learning every day along with the students, right? But still, the teacher has a role there, a major role to play. So he or she will have to facilitate that process of learning. Although all of them have to be pitied, the teacher will have to take that responsibility. That's what I'm saying. All right. So let me look at some of the other comments. Like a critical theory made us to think and explore ourselves in all texts. Yes, absolutely. Okay, thank you for the great session, informative and so much, meticulous delivery, insightful. All right, okay. How many of you, let me ask, I mean, I'm sure there'll be more comments, because many of you are young teachers. What kind of problems, do you commonly face in your classes these days? And then how do you actually overcome, right? think about that. I don't know whether these inputs that I have given you will help, right? But you know, problems can be different from different people coming from different backgrounds. Yes. I always say 3 qualities, you know, that teachers must always remember. One is, the first one, the greatest of all, is humility, right? I mean, if you're humble, it also means that you're learning. You will always be open to new learnings, right? And second thing is patience. And especially in our discipline, it's not like, for instance, science class, you know, where you expect students to show result immediately. In our class, the result can be seen sometimes much later, after 10 years, 20 years, you never know, right? Learning is not immediate. So you need patience. And third thing is generosity of knowledge, right? Give everything that you have freely. Let them take what they want. I don't know how many of you have read this poem by Khalil Gibran on teaching. Have you read that poem, any of you? Khalil Gibran's On Teaching. Why or okay, no. I think you should read. It's available. I mean, it's on internet. You just have to key in Khalil Gibran On Teaching. You will get. It's a beautiful poem. It simply, you know, tells us, look, I mean, you as teachers, we cannot really teach anything, right? He says any teacher who thinks that he or she is teaching, now that itself is a big myth, right? And then it's all about how students, you know, take things from you, whatever you say, all right, and how they process that information, that knowledge, you know, and what becomes a competency later on, right? And very beautiful poem. He simply says that you can only facilitate the process. You can, you know, help create a spark. That's all. The student will have to create the fire. You cannot, right? Maybe you act as a stimulus to some extent. That's all, and that's very true. That's why I say humble. Don't you think, you know, that because of us, you know, teachers, you know, our students are doing well. Look at the number of students who are not doing well. Yes, that's a poem. You got it. Yes, right. And read that poem. It's a beautiful poem. I think for teachers, you know, I mean, every day when you go into a classroom, you know, you must read this and go, look, this is what I'm going to do. This is what I am. Right. So it puts us, you know, down. I mean, not in that sense, right? Not condescendingly, but then it makes us realize where we stand, right? Gets us grounded to the earth, right? So please remember that, yes, that's the role of a teacher. Do we have more questions? Susila, Victor, thank you. Yeah, so a lot of comments. Being pragmatic, yes. Yes, that's also important. Of course, as teachers of literature, sometimes, you know, we tend to be very idealistic, right? And sometimes we go with lofty kind of ambitions, right? Sometimes I see that in our own, you know, spaces when we ask them to, you know, put up a course, right? And you know, all kinds of things, you know, everybody wants to do everything at the same time. No, I mean, you need to look at who your students are. What is it that we have to give? What is it that they need to receive immediately and in the long term, right? So that distinction we will have to make. So you can't cram, all right, everything immediately. Yes. So we need to be pragmatic. Yes. Right. All right. So thank you for the eye-opening session. All right. Yes. I always say, you know, seeing, that's literal seeing, right? But as students of literature, we must convert that seeing sight into insight, right? And that is very important for us. It's not just ordinarily, looking at things, right? Insightful. That is real knowledge, right? Information, knowledge, and competency, right? And wisdom, of course, that is the highest of all, as we say. So it looks like there are no more questions, ma'am. I think Dr. Ajanta, right? I mean, I saw you just now, your video, and I think we can conclude.
Thank you very much for your mind-blowing and stimulating presentation, sir. Convener, Dr. B has new templates for this FDP are highly gorgeous. Your contribution for this FDP is highly appreciated. Now I request you to deliver vote of thanks.
Thank you, Sudha ma'am. And thank you, sir, for your deliberations on the digital natives and the ways to teach them.
Thank you very much for the invitation that you
and
extended. Yes.
To the digital natives is really thought-provoking for us. Though there is no digital support like PPT or audiovisual aids, your composed way of conducting the session is a piece to our minds. It will be a real-life example for some of the non-tech-savvy senior teachers also. Thank you once again, sir. And it gives me immense pleasure to propose a vote of thanks for our faculty development program. As the overwhelmed at this fifth program. Hearty thanks to the principal, doctors, and encourages us to do great things academically. He never let us limit our efforts that gives limitations to our work. Thank you, sir, for inspiring us and the trust placed on us. We, Department of English, SRNM College, are obliged to thank the Deans, Dr. Surendra Palkau and Professor Danny Wong Zekin, Faculty of Languages and Linguistics and Arts and Social Science, University forward with every program organized in our department. And this time, the glory of our program is the association with the University. So we express our hearty thanks to Shangita and Mr. Louis Setti for their valuable guidance since the beginning of this program. Thank you, ma'am and sir, for giving the department at a selfless care, Dr. Koksumi and Dr. Xavier Pradeep Singh. Their valuable insights and deliberations have fulfilled the objective of this program. Though the sessions are scheduled to post-lunch, they have made our participants pay complete attention by engaging them with many activities. We have learned a lot of aspects in their sessions. As we are in the digital era, it is necessary for the teachers to be smart teachers for the digital generation. Once again, we thank all the resource persons for their valuable time and dedication. This is the second program that I'm organizing in partnership with Mr. Harry. Besides being a colleague, he is more and render his support in others. Thank you, sir. Next, the coordinator of the program, Dr. Louis Boyling, who is the most important person within this association. She paid attention to every aspect of the program. Thank you, ma'am, for being with me in all the process of this program, even before the beginning of this program. Another coordinator, Dr. Sudha Devi, who is always ready to render her service even before it is sought. Thank you, ma'am, for your lovely gesture. The last but the most important this program is our participants. Wish you success of this program. Finally, I thank the executive team for their generous support and coordination in making this program a successful one. Thank you all once again.
Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Dear participants, for your certificate, please wait till the first week of October. You will receive your certificate either through WhatsApp group or through your mobile registered email ID. Sorry. The feedback link for this session has been posted in our chat. Please fill it up.